Throughout time, great battles have decided the fate of nations and changed the course of history. From brave warriors charging into battle to cunning generals devising epic strategies, these clashes are more than just fights. They prove that every battle fought are stories of courage, sacrifice, and determination. Join us as we explore some epic battles in history. The Siege of Yorktown. Let's start with one of the battles that marked a pivotal point in American history, the Siege of Yorktown. This battle took place specifically in Virginia, Yorktown, in the year 1781. It was one of the most crucial battles in the American Revolutionary War because it marked the beginning of the end for British rule over the American colonies. The siege began when American forces led by General George Washington shook hands with French forces, led by General Rochambeau, to attack the British Army commanded by General Lord Cornwallis. This siege started on the 28th of September, 1781. For 3 weeks, the American and French forces bombarded the British forces with big guns and 177,000 soldiers. Not only that, they also cleverly blocked the British supply line from the sea, with the aim of completely isolating General Cornwallis. On his part, the general didn't understand why their battle supplies were not coming in, but the British fought with everything they had until they were trapped, overwhelmed, feeling outnumbered, and outfought. They surrendered. On the 19th of October, 1781, General Cornwallis surrendered to the American and French forces, effectively sealing the fate of British efforts to control the colonies. This victory at Yorktown pressed the British into peace negotiations, which led to the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which officially recognized American independence. So, every year you celebrate independence, remember the bravery of General George Washington. The fall of Constantinople. The story of Constantinople is a story of over 1,000 years of grace that ended in a dramatic overthrow by the Ottoman Empire. To fully understand this war, we have to start from the root, Rome. When Roman Emperor Diocletian divided the Roman Empire in the year 293 CE into 2 halves, he picked one to be the capital. The eastern side of the Roman Empire was chosen to be the capital. It was called the City of Byzantine, but would later be called Constantinople. This city was an important center of Christianity and controlled trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. By the year 1453, Constantinople's glory had flourished as the capital of the Roman Empire for centuries. But for the last 150 years, Constantinople has had an odd relationship with its Balkan neighbors. And at that same time, the city has had several terrifying sieges that have resulted in the people of Constantinople fleeing from the city. This resulted to a drop in population to about 50,000 people. Looking closely at the city, what you'd notice is the massive walls that had protected it from all its countless sieges. This wall was 40 feet high and 60 feet thick with 2 rows of rampart and a moat outside. This is quite an impressive architectural magnificence. Little wonder why the city always escaped being conquered. But in that same year of 1453, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, also known as Mehmed the Conqueror, decided it was time to capture this prized city. With a large and well-equipped army, including advanced cannons capable of breaching the city's formidable walls, Mehmed laid siege to Constantinople. Meanwhile, Emperor Constantine XI had a defense force of over 30,000 armed civilians, of which only 7,000 were trained soldiers. But 30,000 is nothing compared to the Ottoman forces of over 80,000 to 100,000 trained soldiers. This battle lasted for nearly 2 months, and on May 29th, after 55 days of defending the city from the Muslim siege, Mehmed's army finally won the siege. How did they breach such a huge wall? Well, stories have it that Constantinople carelessly left the Blachernae Gate unlocked. So the Ottoman troops entered the city through the gate on the 55th day of the siege and defeated the small Christian army. This victory represents the apex of Ottoman ambition as one of the most important Christian cities conquered, and would also represent a major victory of Islam over Christianity. The Battle of Marathon. People do not understand just how epic the Battle of Marathon was. It all started in 499 BC, when the Greek state of Ionia started a rebellion against the Persian rule in the region. After 1 year, Athens and Eretria supported the rebellion by sending part of their navy and soldiers to help the Ionia Greek state. But after 6 years of fighting, the Persians won the war. After the victory, King Darius became furious and vowed to punish Athens and Eretria for supporting the revolt. In September of 490 BC, about 25,000 Persians stood against just 11,000 Greeks. With a vast and formidable army, the Persians landed at a place called Marathon. They were expecting an easy victory over the much smaller Athenian forces. However, the Athenians, led by General Miltiades, chose to confront the Persians head-on rather than wait for reinforcements. Well, that would be suicidal, yes, but General Miltiades was a smart man. He used a secret phalanx formation. Here he positioned his troops in a way that reinforced their flanks, making them appear stronger while thinning the center to draw the Persians in. When the Persians attacked, the Athenian flanks quickly surrounded them, trapping them in a pincer movement. This unexpected maneuver caused chaos in the Persian ranks, and they were smartly defeated. The Greeks lost only 192 men, while the Persians lost 6,400 men. This victory became a morale booster for Greece. It proved that a small, well-disciplined army fighting for its homeland could overcome a much larger force, and it also inspired the Greeks in future battles against Persian invasions. This story is a classic David and Goliath story that still inspires us today. Legend has it that the messenger who ran from Marathon, where the battle took place, to Athens to announce the victory, gave birth to the modern marathon race. The Battle of Gaixia. Next, we have the battle that influenced China's most influential Han dynasty, the Battle of Gaixia. This battle represents the long end of a conflict between two powerful leaders, Liu Bang, the founder of the Han dynasty, and Xiang Yu, the king of the Chu state. In 202 BC, the battle took place in a place called Gaixia, which is located in what is now Anhui province in China. Xiang Yu, on his part, had been a strong warrior and had won many battles against Liu Bang before. But over the years, Liu Bang's forces grew stronger, especially with more generals joining him, which gave him morale and the upper hand for this battle. Liu Bang and his generals, which included Han Xin and Zhang Liang, devised a clever plan to trap Xiang Yu. They surrounded Xiang Yu's army at Gaixia and cut off all his supplies and every escape route. Now, the most interesting part of their plan is how they weakened Xiang Yu's soldiers. Liu Bang had his troops sing the Chu songs outside the camp at night. When Xiang Yu's soldiers heard the Chu songs, which are their hometown songs, they thought that their families had surrendered to Liu Bang. This broke their spirit, and many deserted or surrendered. When Xiang realized this, but it was too late, he was surrounded and had no chance of escape, so he still fought to the end, with only a few hundred loyal soldiers left. After much battle, he accepted defeat and escaped to the Wu River. He went there because he refused to be captured and bring shame to his ancestors. So he chose to end his own life. Before killing himself, he said, "I cannot face my ancestors having failed in my ambitions." Then he committed suicide by slitting his throat with his sword. After his death, the Battle of Gaixia ended, and this victory allowed Liu Bang to establish the Han dynasty, which would go on to rule China for over 400 years. The Battle of Zama. Around 202 BC, the Battle of Zama saw Roman general Scipio lead a tactic that would be termed revolutionary and would end the Second Punic War between Rome and Carthage. This battle took place near Zama and was between Roman general Scipio Africanus and the Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca. Over the years, Hannibal had trouble on Rome's side, famously crossing the Alps with his elephants and winning several key battles in Italy. And this has gone on for 15 years. So Scipio decided to strike back by taking the war directly to Carthage. He successfully secured victories in Spain and North Africa till he met Hannibal in a showdown at Zama. Mind you, these two armies are equally strong, but Scipio was smarter, you see. He had studied Hannibal's tactics and adapted his strategy accordingly. He arranged his forces in a way that neutralized the threat of Hannibal's war elephants. So as the battle raged, the Roman legions demonstrated superior discipline and maneuverability, and thereby gained the upper hand. By the end of the battle, Scipio's tactics and the determination of his soldiers had broken the Carthaginian lines. General Hannibal's once mighty army was defeated, and Carthage was forced to surrender. This Battle of Zama not only ended the Second Punic War, but also marked the rise of Rome as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. It was a turning point that reshaped the ancient world, paving the way for Rome's expansion and centuries of influence over Europe and beyond. The Battle of Hastings. This battle took place on the 14th of October, 1066, and ended in the defeat of Harold II of England by William, Duke of Normandy, and established the Normans as the rulers of England. This battle started as a conflict after the death of King Edward the Confessor of England, who left no direct heir to the throne because he was childless. This led to a power struggle between Harold Godwinson, who was crowned king by the English nobles, and William, the Duke of Normandy, who claimed that Edward had promised him the throne years earlier. Edward used the absence of a clear successor to the throne as a bargaining tool. In 1051, after a breach with Godwine, the Earl of Wessex and the most powerful man in England, Edward probably designated the throne to William, a cousin, as his heir. But after Godwine's death in 1053, his son Harold became Earl of Wessex. Harold spent the next decade gathering his power and winning favor among the nobles and clergy. Harold also swore an oath of fealty to William, meaning that he swore to always remain faithful to him. Harold also promised to uphold William's claim to the English throne. But on the 5th of January, 1066, Edward, on his deathbed, granted the kingdom to Harold, who, with the backing of the English nobility, was crowned king the next day. This made William feel betrayed and angered. He was determined to get back his claim to the throne. William gathered a fleet and army and sailed across the English Channel to invade England. The two armies met near the town of Hastings on a hill called Senlac Hill. Harold's forces were weak, but took a defensive position on the high ground. William's forces were strong, consisting of infantry, cavalry, and archers. William positioned his army for the attack, the archers and crossbowmen in the front line, his heavy infantry in the second, his knights in 3 divisions in the rear, Normans in the center, and Bretons and French on the left and right, respectively. Yes, William was smart enough to gather forces for other places. Harold's English army, lacking archers and cavalry, prepared for defense on the protected summit of the ridge. Their position was not favorable at all, because William's advance was unexpected, and Harold had to fight where he stood or retreat. But how did he expect William to react after going against their fealty? Harold placed himself, his housecarls, and his other trained troops around his standard at the summit of the ridge. The defense, hard-pressed, depleted, and tiring, was worn down and slowly outnumbered. Harold's brothers, Gurth and Leofwine, fell, and, according to the Bayeux Tapestry, Harold himself was killed late in the afternoon when he was struck in the eye by an arrow. The leaderless English fought on until dusk, then broke. A last rally in the gloom caused the Normans further casualties and endangered William himself. As darkness fell, the English scattered, leaving William the winner of one of the most daring battles in history. After the battle, his army moved to isolate London, where William was crowned king on December 25, 1066. This battle ended Anglo-Saxon rule and began a new era of Norman influence, reshaping English society, law, and language, and laying the foundation for the England we know today. The Battle of Gettysburg. Every other battle we've been considering in this video went on for weeks, months, and even years. But the Battle of Gettysburg was a three-day battle. It was an American Civil War fought between Union and Confederate forces between the 1st of July and the 3rd of July, 1863, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, led by General Robert E. Lee, sought to invade the North and secure a decisive victory on Union soil. Meanwhile, the Union Army of the Potomac, commanded by General George G. Meade, was determined to halt Lee's advance. This battle began when Confederate forces encountered Union troops in Gettysburg. Over the next 3 days, the fighting was intense and relentless. With both sides suffering heavy casualties. On the second day, Confederate forces launched several assaults on Union positions, but failed to break through. The third day was Lee's infamous attack known as Pickett's Charge, where about 12,000 Confederate troops made a direct assault on the center of the Union lines. This charge was what ended in disaster for the Confederates, with massive losses and no significant gain, making the Union win the battle. This victory halted Lee's invasion of the North and gave the Union Army a much-needed morale boost. First Battle of the Masurian Lakes. In the cold winter of 1914, the First Battle of the Masurian Lakes broke out, with soldiers fighting fiercely in icy waters and dark forests, marking a key moment in World War I. The battle was the second heavy defeat of a Russian army by the Germans. It was also part of the German plan to drive the Russian forces out of East Prussia. German forces, commanded by Generals Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff, faced off against Russian troops under the command of Generals Alexander Samsonov and Paul von Rennenkampf. At this time of the war, the Germans knew what the Russians were planning because they could read their messages. Apart from that, another advantage the Germans had was they knew the swampy area of East Prussia called the Masurian Lakes. Paul von Hindenburg knew the Russians might attack there, so he made plans in case of such an attack. On the other hand, the Russians planned their attack on East Prussia with no knowledge of the area. They had no rail transport to move troops, and no proper plan for enough food and ammunition, and moved only with horses and infantry. Their only hope was on their superior numbered army. They were confident they could defeat the Germans. But when the Russian armies first moved into East Prussia to form a pincer attack, Hindenburg completely defeated the Russian Second Army at the Battle of Tannenberg in August 1914. When the Germans began their attack on the 7th of September 1914, Rennenkampf was immediately outnumbered 3-1. 2 days later, Rennenkampf ordered a withdrawal, and 2 divisions were left behind to slow the Germans' advances. By the 13th of September, Rennenkampf had achieved his withdrawal with much of his army still intact, unlike what happened in the Battle of Tannenberg before it. The Battle of Masurian Lakes cost Russia's First Army 125,000 men and 150 artillery guns in total, with the Germans losing just 40,000 men. Now, it's time for our subscribers' pick. This image shows a powerful scene of a siege, where armies use large weapons like catapults and towers to attack a city with strong walls. It reminds us of some of the most famous battles in history, where attackers tried to capture cities protected by high walls. One such battle was the Siege of Constantinople in 1453, which marked the end of the Byzantine Empire. The Ottoman forces, led by Sultan Mehmed II, used huge cannons and other siege weapons to break through the city's strong defenses. This image also brings to mind the Siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, when Roman soldiers surrounded the city and used siege towers to get over its walls. After a long and hard battle, the Romans broke through and took the city, marking a key moment in the Jewish-Roman wars. This image truly depicts how epic battles in history looked like. Tell us in the comment section what you think about this image. The Siege of Baghdad, 1258. The Siege of Baghdad in 1258 was a significant and devastating event in world history. Before the siege, Baghdad was the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, which had ruled much of the Muslim world for over 500 years. This city was founded in 762 by Caliph al-Mansur, and quickly the city became a place of learning and commerce. It was home to the House of Wisdom, where scholars from various parts of the world gathered to study science, medicine, philosophy, and literature. Baghdad was filled with libraries, universities, and vibrant markets, making it one of the most splendid cities in the medieval world. On the other side of history is the Mongol Empire, which had been expanding rapidly under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his descendants. By the 13th century, the Mongols had conquered vast territories across Asia and Europe, creating the largest contiguous land empire in history. Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, was tasked by his brother, the great Khan Mongke, to expand Mongol rule into the Muslim territories of the Middle East. This expansion aimed to subdue the Islamic states, which the Mongols viewed as potential threats to their dominance. So in 1253, Hulagu Khan began his campaign against the Islamic states, with the aim of conquering Persia and the Arab world. He led a large and well-equipped army, which included engineers, siege weapons, and thousands of soldiers skilled in mounted archery. Hulagu's army moved westward, crushing several Muslim states along the way. Hulagu was ruthless and destructive. Baghdad, the jewel of the Islamic world, was an important target for Hulagu. The Abbasid Caliphate, under the leadership of Caliph al-Mustasim, was weakened by internal strife and had lost much of its former military strength and territory. Despite the growing Mongol threat, the Caliph did not take decisive action to strengthen his city's defenses or seek alliances with other Muslim states. He underestimated the Mongols' power and the resolve of Hulagu Khan. On November 1257, Hulagu's army reached the outskirts of Baghdad. The Mongols surrounded the city, cutting off any escape or reinforcements. Hulagu then demanded that the Caliph surrender, but al-Mustasim refused, believing that the Mongols could not breach the strong defenses of Baghdad and that the Almighty would protect the city. This refusal sealed Baghdad's fate. On January 1258, Hulagu's forces launched their assault. The Mongols were well prepared, bringing with them advanced siege engines, catapults, and other war machines. They began bombarding Baghdad's walls, weakening them with continuous artillery fire. Mongol engineers constructed dikes to divert the Tigris River, which flooded parts of the city, adding to the chaos and making the defense even more difficult. After several days of relentless bombardment, the Mongols breached the walls of Baghdad on the 10th of February, 1258. Once inside, the Mongol soldiers unleashed a wave of destruction and slaughter. The Mongols showed no mercy, killing men, women, and children alike. It is estimated that hundreds of thousands of people were killed, although the exact number remains uncertain due to conflicting historical sources. One of the most tragic aspects of the siege was the destruction of Baghdad's cultural heritage. The Mongols looted and burned the city, including its famous libraries, which housed countless manuscripts and books on various subjects. The House of Wisdom, one of the greatest centers of knowledge in the world, was destroyed. Scholars, scientists, and poets were killed, and their works lost forever. After the city was taken, Caliph al-Mustasim was captured and forced to surrender. Hulagu did not show any mercy towards the Caliph. He was in fact irritated by him and saw him as a weak leader who had foolishly resisted Mongol power. According to some reports, Hulagu had al-Mustasim executed by being trampled to death by horses, a method chosen to avoid spilling royal blood on the ground. The fall of Baghdad effectively ended the Abbasid Caliphate as a political and military power, although a few members of the Abbasid family later survived and fled to Egypt, where they were given ceremonial roles by the Mamluk rulers. The caliphate never regained its former glory or influence. The Battle of Arbela. The Battle of Arbela, commonly known as the Battle of Gaugamela, took place in 331 BC. It was a conflict between Alexander the Great of Macedonia and Darius III of Persia. These were historically two powerful men, making this battle one of the most famous in ancient history, especially because it marked the end of the Persian Empire and solidified Alexander's reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. Let's dive deeper, shall we? This battle took place near the town of Gaugamela, which is modern-day Iraq. At first, it felt like Alexander's force was smaller and weaker, but with highly disciplined and strategically brilliant, His army faced off against the much larger Persian forces. Darius III gathered a massive army, which outnumbered the Macedonians significantly. And he chose a flat battlefield to maximize the advantage of his war chariots and cavalry. However, Alexander's genius lay in his ability to adapt his tactics to overcome these challenges. He carefully studied the terrain and Darius's formations, and used his superior cavalry and infantry to create gaps in the Persian lines. He waited for a crucial moment, and when he got it, Alexander led a direct charge at Darius himself, causing panic and disorder within the Persian ranks. The psychological impact of this charge led Darius to flee the battlefield, and his army soon crumbled without their leader. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.